the country is trying to head, because before it was just applied to soldiers and like children that's been through abuse, but now it's becoming where they're examining communities being affected by trauma. And you mentioned mental health. I'm not sure how well people keep up with those type of things, but now there's been a huge initiative in San Francisco where they have crime designated as a mental health issue. And in fact, the district attorney from San Francisco went to DC personally to push that become basically part of federal monies now that's distributed is looking at crime as a mental health. So like Brother Sharif said, now your prisons won't fill up as much when you realize people have mental health issues that needs to be diagnosed. And through that, social service, human service, community development practitioners, all of us become even more relevant now in dealing with the populations that we serve.
So we're going to open it up to questions, so please feel free to line up at the microphone. Our panelists are here till 6, so whether we get through a lot of questions or if people want, you can address them personally as well.
Yes, sir. I'm going to jump right up because I have a short amount of time and I do not have a question, but I have a statement. I don't want to turn my back to anybody, so I'm going to go over here if you don't mind. First, in regards to water, just so that it's clear, formaldehyde, when it enters the system with the body being 98.6 degrees, changes into furic acid. Furic acid is what you see when you burn plastic. All right? Furic acid causes carbon monoxide poisoning. 50% of your cells infected, you die from carbon monoxide poisoning. Second, the amount of ethanol, which is essentially unleaded gasoline, that is in one valve of water is 90 times the legal amount for ingestion. We're talking alcohol here. So a person can very easily be charged with drunk driving if they're high on water, as they could with, possession or use of angel dust, which is also in there as well, PCP rather, which is in there as well. So that you have to take into account. The PCP causes dissociation. To make it very simple, a person who is dissociative can't identify their thumb, let alone another human being. So, I think there's a number of things that have to be put in perspective in regards to water. I just wanted to touch that real quick first, because the fight to eliminate this particular drug needs to continue. And I know myself and Councilor Bob Doherty, we formed the health committee on the council, and he may not know, but I'm saying it now just in case you don't know. One of the things I plan to do is to take the fight to the assembly, the state assembly, their committee for drug and alcohol abuse, because it's in the assembly with the efforts to make the possession and use of this drug illegal that this effort has died for some reason. So we need to educate our electeds in the state assembly so that we can have adequate laws to deal with this particular substance. Now, I'm going to shift, if you don't mind, real quick. I swear I'm not going to talk you to death.
You want my chair?
No, I'm all right. But, listening to a lot of what was said, I want to add maybe in support of some of the things that were said, just to provide some perspective. One, between my education background is in psychology. I don't co-sign for psychology 100%, but some of its concepts are practical. For example, persons between the age of 2 and 7 have what they refer to as a one-dimensional thinking. To give an example of that, a person with one-dimensional thinking cannot separate words from the objects they describe. Or to give you another example, a 2-year-old is standing in front of the TV, you tell them to move, they move 1 inch because they assume if they can see, you can see. That is one-dimensional thinking. Now the problem with that is that problem is never dealt with in people during their development. And so this problem of one-dimensional thinking is carried into adulthood. And essentially what you have is some adults who are, or in maybe the comical way I say it, we have 35, 50-year-old teenagers out here trying to make an effort to solve a teenage problem that they never solved. One dead giveaway that you might be a victim of one-dimensional thinking is that name calling still affects you. because a young person believes that they're a dog when they're called a dog because they can't separate the word from the object it describes. And you have a lot of adults who still succumb to name calling, to maybe lend to the point about the bickering and the conflict that happens, as mentioned by Noble and Sharif. Another thing to consider is this. You know, you talk about the blind leading the blind, and I hope you don't mind my candor, but if you know me, you know I really don't care about that. And that's not ego, I'm just telling you the truth. Sometimes when you talk about change in paradigm, in the same way that the environment has shaped their thinking, it is a changed environment that will change their thinking. So unless you change the environment, including the language, for example, right now all of us adults in this room can make the decision to no longer call our neighborhoods the hood and change it back into something more respectable, considering that the word hood has a negative connotation. We have to make the effort to change the environment if we're looking to affect people positively. You know, one of the biggest problems when you talk about blind leading the blind, persons who are still victims of name calling, persons who are still chasing significance. I want to lean to a statement that Noble made about the search for love. You know, certainly love is what they're missing, but one thing we know for sure is that their search is for significance, a significance that they're not receiving at home, and one that they believe they're receiving in the street. You know, and when you talk about dealing with a teenage problem, we've watched, even before I was a teenager, persons attempt to solve a problem that they didn't understand. And you can't understand it if you haven't done it yourself. So, you know, at least my personal charge to everybody in here is that the work starts with you. Every single person in this room can make a contract with themselves to first improve themselves. For example, racial prejudice is not a group problem, it's an individual problem. You have to change how you think in order to make things better in your life. In that same respect, while some people may grunt and groan, economic hardship begins as a personal problem. It is not a group problem all at once. Why? Because we don't all get wealthy in one swoop. It's impractical. But what it seems is that people escape, or do their best to escape, responsibility and ignore the need for discipline. And I'm talking about adults. I'm not talking about young people who have no clue about who they are. I'm talking about the adults who have become convinced, or at least convinced themselves in some delusional way that they figured it out. You know, so the first thing we have to do, again, is to realize that we've had a lot of the blind leading the blind. And I'm going to be honest, I sit in a lot of discussions about violence and what's wrong with people. And oftentimes, some of the people, not all, are as off the wagon as the people that they're referring to. And you have to be able to call a spade, otherwise you're not serious about changing circumstances. So again, if each of us could take our own step in improving our own thinking, not do some of the things that was referred to, like refer to those kids as those kids or that problem as their problem. Realize that it equally affects us all, but it only takes you to change yourself to change your household. Potentially positively affect people who you associate with. This is where it starts, because oftentimes, to that point, we look to pawn off the responsibility for our lives on the next guy. You fix my problem. You fix my kid's problem. And I'll say this, I've said it all the time, and Councilor Hudson always look at me a little funny and giggle when I said I would not trust this village to raise my kid. No way. I got that one. But we each have to have that same type of mentality, at least in our own households first. Certainly some kids get away from us. But we have to at least have the courage to change the way we think, change the way we communicate. Stop, you know, sneak hustling and sneak beefing like some of the grown-ups do. And by example, and through our effort, we change our circumstances and circumstances of our kids.
As I was listening, I just have a comment. I heard everybody saying the lack of what they're lacking. But being in this work for as long as I've been here, I've noticed that we'll get these babies in a room and we'll give them everything that we think they need. But guess what we do? We send them right back into the environment where the problem started. So we have to start looking at it and thinking about it. When we're touching them, we have to have a whole nother level, because we need to get into that environment that these children are going to spend the most of their time in. So that was just one comment as I was listening to what we're lacking. We're treating symptoms. We're not treating the whole problem.
Any other questions for the panelists?
So I'm going to use the word game because I don't know what other word to use, but now my mind is beginning to think about even my own understanding of that word now. So it's a two-part question. One is there really such a thing as getting out of a gang? And if the answer to that question is yes, how do we help facilitate that transition?
Well, when you talk about the issue of walking away from your hood, so to speak, young people may suffer feelings of abandonment, right? Because you almost feel like you're leaving your comrades on the battlefield. So Syracuse is not a place where, you know, they'll kill a family member and such if you try to get out of a situation. So it's always a door for you to walk away or walk out of, but where we felt at, there haven't been the support systems in place to congratulate you for making that change in your life and moving forward. So they're not surrounded with those resources, because you gotta know, if I spend 15 to 20 years involved in this situation, this is my protection. So when you quit, other people don't quit, right? So we have to create those systems where we become a tool for them to go to other people and say, listen, he not with that no more. But they have to understand and start to demonstrate their behavior has to be peaceful as well. So it have to be a two-way street dealing with young people walking away from that situation. And that's going to take a lot of training, so on and so forth. But it's something definitely that long overdue.
The common councilors kind of amped me up, so forgive me, I'm about to say something pretty controversial. To his point and to Noble's point, the environment has to change first and foremost. But the environment is not just a physical, it's not a place of meets and bounds. The environment is the state of mind that has to change. And we here in the room and our youth, our brothers and sisters in the streets, have to take a proactive position in this redefinition. This is what I mean. It goes back to the whole thing about gang identity. What's a gang? If I ask 10 people in this room, I'll get 10 different answers. But if I ask law enforcement what a gang is, you'll get one answer. And that one answer benefits a certain demographic. That's why they have that one answer. It's just real. So, you know, what happens, every nationality here in America, you know, from the Italian, from the Polish, the Irish, everyone has had street crew organizations. Let's be real. They all have them. Where are they now? What did the community do? What did their community do? They did something intelligent. First of all, they had a community. To my point, to the point that Brother Noble made, we don't have communities. Let's just be real. We have voluntary concentration camps. Voluntary concentration camps. I'll say it again. That's what we have. We're cool with it. That's the problem. We don't have communities because a community is a subdivision, as Brother Terrence said. A community is a subdivision, is a very small subdivision of a nation, which is a political unit. It works together. It's a machine. It's a social machine. We don't have that yet. So,